Living through the LA fires has obviously caused a lot of reflection on the state of the world and things of that nature. But one piece of art that jumps to my mind is a poem by Charles Bukowski called Dinosauria We. So I want to go ahead and read this poem to you and then kind of break down why I'm thinking about it and what the larger context of it means for, us as a society. Okay, so without further ado, here is a Dinosauria We by Charles Bukowski. Born like this, into this, as the chalk faces smile, as Mrs. Death laughs, as the elevators break, as political landscapes dissolve, as the supermarket bag boy holds a college degree, as the oily fish spit out their oily prey, as the sun is masked, we are born like this, into these carefully mad wars, into the sight of broken factory windows of emptiness, into the bars where people no longer speak to each other, into fistfights that end as shootings and knifings. Born into this. Into hospitals which are so expensive that it's cheaper to die. Into lawyers who charge so much it's cheaper to plead guilty. Into a country where the jails are full and the madhouse is closed. Into a place where the masses elevate fools into rich heroes. Born into this. Walking and living through this. Dying because of this. Muted because of this. Castrated, debauched, disinherited because of this. Fooled by this. Used by this. Pissed on by this. Made crazy and sick by this. Made violent. Made inhuman by this. The heart is blackened. The fingers reach for the throat. The gun, the knife, the bomb. The fingers reach toward an unresponsive God. The fingers reach for the bottle, the pill, the powder. We are born into this sorrowful deadliness. We are born into a government 60 years in debt that soon will be unable to even pay the interest on that debt. And the banks will burn. Money will be useless. There will be open and unpunished murder in the streets. It will be guns and roving mobs. Land will be useless. Food will become a diminishing return. Nuclear power will be taken over by the many. Explosions will continually shake the earth. Radiated robot men will stalk each other. The rich and the chosen will watch from space platforms. Dante's Inferno will be made to look like a children's playground. The sun will not be seen, and it will always be night. Trees will die. All vegetation will die. Radiated men will eat the flesh of radiated men. The sea will be poisoned. The lakes and rivers will vanish. Rain will be the new gold. The rotting bodies of men and animals will stink in the dark wind. The last few survivors will be overtaken by new and hideous diseases. And the space platforms will be destroyed by attrition, the petering out of supplies, the natural effect of general decay, and there will be the most beautiful silence never heard. Born out of that, the sun still hidden there, awaiting the next chapter. So sit with that for a moment, but yeah, hopefully it had the same profound effect on you as it did me. Now, granted, there's other pieces of art, whether literature, films, poems, music, that echo a lot of this sentiment, right? So it's not unique to Charles Bukowski, but, Charles is someone that, the work that he has put out really speaks to me, speaks to a lot of people. And with this in particular, this was written in 1991, so, 30 years plus since the time of this writing, he was onto something, right? The problems of that day are only worsened today. And, the frequency with which we see natural disasters. So I'm not, not just the LA fires, but hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, tsunamis, all kinds of stuff, right? They're getting much more frequent and greater in terms of its devastation. And obviously, I'm not the one to just outright solve this myself. I don't think I can. It has to be a collective coming together. We're all at fault, but we are all capable of fixing this. And, a lot of effort has to start to go into that. The idea that we need to really become stewards of the land, and how we approach this, as opposed to thinking we can just conquer nature, because it's a false belief. Eventually nature fights back, and it does not care. It can be relenting, right? And so, the poem itself is a dire warning of where we could be headed, and part of what we're seeing now, as dire as it is, climate scientists and things of that nature echo the sentiment that it's never too late. Like, even just small incremental changes that we combat what's happening can have, great effect. And also, we have to just do it for all of us, right? There's a climate activist named Mike Davis. He wrote The Ecology of Fear, and in particular, it was about the LA disasters and things of that nature. But he's someone who, through the civil rights movement and stuff like that, he actually, in spite of everything that he forewarned of the natural disasters, he kept optimism, and this idea of love for one another and coming together in community, which might seem trite, easier said than done, sort of a thing. But, eventually we are getting to a point where we have to just accept the reality. As Byron Katie would say, when we argue against reality, we always lose 100% of the time. Paraphrasing, of course, but that's the sentiment. And so, if we stand a chance, because it's not just about LA. As I said, these things are continually happening all over the world, and the word climate resilient in terms of real estate, it's going to grow, right? And in some cases, as far as a prediction, those who can be more mobile and agile will be better off. And of course, that's scary to think about, because we always, large chunks of society considers putting down roots, right? Building a family and so forth. And the whole notion of community, part of that is also in terms of location, right? And so the idea of being kind of more nomadic and stuff like that is a scary one. And I'm not necessarily advocating it, but I'm just kind of pointing it out as far as, the people that can be better off, the people that will be more mobile, they will have an advantage as time goes by. Again, unless we start to do something. And so, I think, again, I'm not the right person to have all these answers. And, a lot of times, I equate it to no different than, let's say right now with all the disasters, there's a lot of people that want to help, which is great. But instead of starting something new, like a charity or your own sort of thing, it's like there are already pre-existing organizations within the community that have been doing advocacy work for, 10, 20, 30 years. These organizations are already boots on the ground, so they know how to best help the community. And so rather than starting something new, we have to join efforts with the pre-existing people and elevate that. And that is how we start to get through this, So, yeah, while it's not, out and out, here's how to fix everything, it's probably not as optimistic and hopeful as my other episodes, but it's a lot easier to, talk about something very specific of like a piece of art or whatever than it is something that is global, right? And also in many ways, when you try to think about it all at once, it can be debilitating because it's so large. It's hard to wrap your mind around. But that's why we all need to come together for that reason, because we can, each be a small portion of the larger whole and help create that needed effect. So, if anything, consider this like a rallying war cry. I don't know, I don't think that's the right term, but something along those lines where we all have to start figuring out how to do our part. And much like with the rebuilding of LA, it is very much, slow and steady. It's going to be a marathon. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think that's also part of an issue, is that when we look at activism, I think there's a lot of egos and heroism, and not saying that people aren't doing it out of a good place, but the notion that I must save the world just inherently comes out of the ego and is not what's needed. We all need to do our part, and doing that part isn't always the most sexiest thing, just out and out in terms of helping, volunteering in the past few days here in LA. Volunteering means literally just rolling up your sleeves and going through tons and tons of clothes and organizing them, right? That is not sexy, glamorous work. Or people have been volunteering throughout their communities to help sweep up all the various parks and stuff like that, to get rid of any dry brush and things of that nature, to prevent potential other fire outbreaks, right? And this is part of that collective joint effort. We all have to do it, and there's a sacrifice involved. But when everyone's going in the same direction or pulling in the same direction, the weight is easier to bear, right? So, yeah, just food for thought, as they say, yeah, there's a lot to think about, but I encourage you to comment down below with any of your thoughts. And, I know in many ways it can be very debilitating, but, that's not the right way to go about it. Ultimately, we have to keep that sense of optimism in order to propel action, right? So, yeah, that's what we have to do. Thank you for taking time to tune in.